Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with the greatest recordings ever. And today we're talking about one of the greatest concertos ever, Beethoven's Piano Concerto Number 4. And one of the greatest recordings ever of that work is clearly this one, Claudio Arrau with the Staatskapelle Dresden under Colin. Boy, does this recording have everything going for it. Claudio Arrau was, of course, one of the great Beethoven pianists of the second half of the 20th century, and he recorded this concerto a few times, 3, I think, at a minimum, but this is his last and, to my mind, the greatest. Now, the earlier ones under Galliera and Haitink were very good. I mean, he was always very, very good in this music. No question about that. But here we have an extra weight, an extra depth, an extra thoughtfulness in a concerto that can take it. You know, some concertos, they can't take it, like Wieniawski violin concertos. They don't take extra weight and depth and thoughtfulness too well. And there are piano concertos too, where you don't want to perhaps overthink them. You just want to get out there and play them and have a good time, like the Mendelssohn First Piano Concerto, for example. But this one is, first of all, Beethoven's tribute to Mozart. And Mozart, as we know, is the guy who kind of invented classical concerto form. And it's an amazing work for that reason, because it takes those wonderful qualities of poise and refinement and elegance and melodic fluency and raises them to an entirely new Beethovenian level. I wouldn't say it's better than Mozart, but it's of Mozart, but of Beethoven as well. Particularly in the central slow movement, which is that amazing dialogue between piano and strings where something's happening. It is so operatic and thus so Mozartian, because Mozart was, of course, operatic in virtually everything he did. But there is that unbelievable quality. I mean, it was, it's been described as, Orpheus taming the wild beasts, or so-and-so taming the furies, or something taming something. It's this amazing dialogue where the strings are sort of rude and bumpy, and the piano is conciliatory, and then it has the piano is, doing its best to calm down the strings until at the end there's this tragic outbreak of sentiment at the very end, and a conclusion in total darkness out of which the finale gradually emerges, into the light of day. And oh my gosh, it's just such an amazing piece when you really sit down and listen to it. You can highlight those elements. I mean, this is the kind of performance, it's the kind of performance that you will never hear from period instruments, because it seems to contain qualities that are anathema to that approach to music making. Here we have an orchestra, the Staatskapelle Dresden, which, to my way of thinking, was the greatest German orchestra, and just had an incredible ensemble quality and history and provenance going back gazillions of years. And especially in this music, a conductor who is one of the supreme Mozart conductors and Beethoven conductors when he was hot, which he is here. Also in the second half of the 20th century, you've got Claudio Arrau, who has a pedigree that runs back through Liszt to Beethoven himself, because remember, Liszt had met Beethoven when he was a kid. We're not talking about. It's a funny thing, one of the weirdest things about the period instrument or authenticity movement is that it tends to make us think of things as further away than they really were. But they're not. I mean, we're talking about 4 or 5 generations of pianists, which is more than enough time for certain aesthetic approaches. Talk about the actual sound of the instrument or all that garbage. We're talking about the aesthetics of what the music means, and to have that to be transmitted from pupil to teacher, and within the body of the orchestra, within the various schools of playing, all of those things are preserved. And they're preserved in this performance in a very, very special way. You're not going to hear anything like it by anybody else. And it's just a remarkably intense, profound, moving, expressive performance of one of the greatest pieces ever written for piano and orchestra. It's that simple, and gorgeously recorded too, by the way. These were East German radio engineers doing these recordings, and boy, did they know how to record the Staatskapelle Dresden. I mean, the sound is absolutely luminous. So this is a tremendous testament, I think, not only to the artists in question, but also to the great tradition of Beethoven playing, one that certain groups amongst us would have us claim is somehow wrong or modernistically out of phase with what Beethoven really intended. Crap. This is what Beethoven really intended. So keep on listening, friends. Thanks so much for joining me. Take care.